Welcome to my podcast. My name is Alex Dove, and I'm an author. The goal of my podcast is to bring you along on my journey and share with you my experiences on writing. It is a peek behind the curtain, if you will, on the occasional struggles and more often the incredible joys of writing. During this time, I'll walk you through my writing practices and share behind-the-scenes secrets. This will allow you the opportunity to understand the style behind my writing and to know a little bit more about the person behind the books. Hello, my name is Alex Dove. I'm an author of middle grade and adult suspense fiction. I generally write suspense and thriller novels focused on families torn by tragedy and the difficult struggles faced when that familial bond is threatened or broken. Creating a successful story is like making a tasty 7-layer taco dip. You need all the right ingredients and in all the right amounts in exactly the right places. Sound difficult? Not with the right recipe. So, where do we begin? That all depends on the story we're crafting and the framework we're starting with. But using general broad strokes, let's start off at the beginning using a traditional 3-act structure. A story has lots of ingredients: characters, setting, time frame, conflict, goals, wants and needs, among many others. It is not uncommon for an author to pour all of these ingredients into a big bowl all at once and stir them up. A good dish takes time to create. Layering our ingredients into the story bit by bit, like a tasty 7-layer taco dip, nets us the best results. There is a term used in the writing community called an info dump. This is where an author literally dumps information, such as the setting or a character's backstory, onto the page into a string of long and often hard-to-read paragraphs. That would be like taking a whole can of olives or diced tomatoes and just throwing them right into the middle of our tasty dip. But spread that same information out across several chapters, sprinkling a bit here and a bit there, spreads out those olives and thins the otherwise jarring effect. So, what's next? Where do we start? How do we get from point A to point Z and end up with a delicious appetizer? By careful planning and preparation. It can be easy to fall into the trap of giving out all of the information at once. You have a lot to tell, right? How else is the reader going to know if you don't tell them? Well, we're going to tell them, just not all at once. Let's start with the characters. How many does a good story have? That depends on the story. Look at the screenplay and motion picture Castaway. Most of the movie was played by a single character. At the opposite end of the spectrum, we have George R.R. Martin's epic adventure series, A Game of Thrones, which is comprised of dozens of characters. So, how exactly do we go about introducing all of the characters in a book? Look back to the 7-layer taco dip. We're going to layer them in. Setting can be done just the same. We're going to layer characters and setting into our story scene by scene and chapter by chapter. When our story begins, the most important thing is to hook the reader and introduce them to both the setting and the main character. Don't throw the can of refried beans at the reader. Let them know a little bit about the characters at a bit at a time. Don't introduce too many characters all at once or dump the setting all in one spot. Spread it out across multiple scenes. We all learned in grammar school the importance of who, when, where, why, and what, right? These are the foundational questions we yearn to know. It's what drives the reader through the story and compels them to turn the pages. Tease them. Tease the reader and make them yearn to know more. Make them question why and how. They'll turn the page to find out. Work the information into the story like a good recipe, and the reader will be begging for more. But dump the ingredients in and all at once, and it spoils the flavor. Ways to break up a story and keep it moving without slowing it down with a bunch of backstory is to show the characters or the setting through action. Have a character act in a certain way to demonstrate a particular trait. Equally so, the same can be done for the setting by slipping it into the action of the characters. One good way of introducing information is by allowing it to naturally flow through dialogue. I'm not saying that you introduce backstory through dialogue. For instance, John, you know that I'm allergic to shellfish. I spent a week in the hospital after a bad reaction. That type of thing really doesn't fly. Readers have been there. They've done that. They don't like it. It doesn't work. But skillfully weave historical information or setting into the dialogue and make it flow organically, then you have a winner-winner chicken dinner. For instance, Mary stared out the narrow window of their kitchen at the cherry blossom tree just getting ready to bloom in their backyard. John, what do you want for dinner? John shrugged, flipping through a magazine of recipes. Dunno, he said, suddenly stopping his finger on a page. Gumbo sounds tasty. You're not allergic to sausage, right? Sure, but skip the shrimp. Once in the hospital was enough for me. This was a much better approach, and we folded in setting and backstory without bogging down the pacing. Don't force it. If it doesn't make sense to have it naturally appear in the scene, then cut it out of the story. Find a new scene or a new way to get that information across. One of the best ways to accomplish this is to describe the world as your character sees it. Demonstrate through their sight, smell, taste, sound, and touch. Weave their memories and feelings into a conversation. Don't force them. Back to our recipe analogy. A person might not like thick, chunky tomatoes, but dice them up small and flavor them with seasonings, always remembering to layer them whenever possible, and people may just eat up what you have to offer. Serve one or two details or characters at a time and only when it's relevant. If you break characters and settings, the two most common infodump culprits across multiple scenes and over the course of several chapters, and then only when it's relevant, the information still comes across, just not in slow, clunky manners that bog down the story and makes the reader upset. Sometimes it's what you don't say that is important. Subtext can be a powerful tool that raises tension and builds character depth. If a character scowls and crosses their arms, it can sometimes say more than if they open their mouth. And sometimes you don't have to go into depth about describing a character. Describing their environment can go a long way into illustrating a character's personality. For instance, Mary walked into John's bedroom and the corners of her mouth pulled into a frown. Mary wanted to turn and run into the cherry blossom fields, but felt as if she were walking on stilts. The room was spotless. There were no clothes on the floor and no dust on the shelves. Not a thing was out of place except for the gun on the dresser. So, I hope you've enjoyed this session. Join me soon for another podcast or check out my blog for additional topics. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter, where members are presented with new information or special offers. You can find me on social media outlets such as X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Remember to watch, like, and subscribe. Check back on my website soon for more content. Thank you for joining me on my podcast. Come back and join me again as I share my writing journey. This is Alex Dove, and until next time, may your pen never run dry, your muse never wander, and your tales never lose their magic.